Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Dead Space Impossible Mode, no damage plus restricted run. We are on Chapter 6, Environmental Hazard, and this is the chapter you were all waiting for, ladies and gentlemen, the beginning of the end. The part where things start to get real bad, real quick. And for anybody that's just joining me, look at my ammunition right now, ladies and gentlemen. Look at this beautiful thing. I am almost completely max on plasma cutter rounds. I've never felt more comfortable. And this fight is amazing, by the way. This is one of my favourite fights in the game, Hydroponics, and I didn't even remember it other than really liking the environment, but there is a lot of enemies in this room. You have a ton of slashers. You have a ton of slashers that dynamically come through the vents. You have a ton of lurkers too. So I'm going to be moving around this room and really using as many environmental hazards as I can. But be careful going down any of the dead ends, because these enemies will come through the vents and they'll cut you off. Luckily, these enemies are all basic slashers, so other than being very quick when you look at them, you can put these guys down really quickly and it feels super satisfying. And one of the things I love the most about this fight is, in spite of this being the hardest difficulty, these enemies go down really quick if you're accurate. And in spite of them being so many of them, it never feels unfair. There are a lot of games that like to throw a lot of enemies at you, and it never truly feels like a properly fair engagement, but this is not the case. In here, if you're dying, if you're getting wrecked, it's because you're not handling the situation right. And there's a lot of cheesy things you can do in this particular sequence. You can stay by the doorway, that's really effective. You can even go into the breathing rooms where the particular infected is respiring, and you can use that as bait and kill them in the spawns in there. But to me, if you want to get the real experience in this room, and if you want a good challenge, you stand and you hold your ground here, and you see what you can do. Because you have to be very dynamic and you have to pay attention, because if you don't, you die. And if this is not exciting gameplay, I don't know what is, you know? Like, this is pretty much the reason I did this project, to have moments like this. And I hope you're enjoying the project too. So, we're going to be crushing this new necromorph here, which is this breathing necromorph. And I think this is the first level that I have to say, when I came back to it after playing Callisto Protocol, this was the first area that actually felt like it overstayed its welcome a little bit. Everything else I thought was immaculately paced and balanced, and really, it just felt like they trimmed all the fat and it was as good as it could get. And then I think that this particular sequence has you killing a little bit too many of... There's maybe one or two of these monsters that I would have reduced, because the magic trick starts to fade as we get an enhanced slasher here coming on me. Just take that out of context, Dreamcast guy. I love how the flamethrower ammunition's just chilling on the ground right there. He does his little duck as well. I love that animation. I wonder if they're going to have that in the remake. That little cheeky duck. Look how durable these monsters are. Incredibly durable. I learned a very important lesson as well, trying to manipulate that enemy. If you break their limbs by knocking them down, they can instantly attack you, so be very careful. And then we have the introduction to the Exploder, which might not be his name, but that's definitely his intention. This is a creature that is used way more in Dead Space 2. And in Dead Space 2, you need to learn to deal with these guys quickly, because if you can't, you will lose. One of the things I've never agreed with this monster is I don't understand why that sack that explodes takes more than one shot. And I appreciate that I'm using an unupgraded weapon, and maybe they never anticipated anybody would do that, but I feel like if anything hits that sack, it should die. I feel like that's just how that should work. But that enemy can come in handy too in certain rooms. If you sever his explosive arm and use that appendage on groups, you can save yourself a ton of ammunition, and you can do a lot of crowd control as well. But here come a couple of lurkers in 0G. This is one of the areas where I really miss having Stasis, because the lurkers take a decent amount of damage, especially the black ones. And if you have Stasis, you can simply Stasis them as their tentacles are coming out and then stomp on them and hit all their tentacles at once. And with one or two Stasises, you can kill them without shooting a bullet. But right now, of course, this is a no Stasis challenge run. And I think that's the reason you're probably here, because when you think Dead Space, you know, there's a ton of things you can do to make the game harder, but when you think about what you have to do to win, most people think that Stasis is almost mandatory. I know I did for the longest time, but I learnt on this run that playing the game without it is a lot more fun. I never thought it would work that way, and this is a bit of a cheeky trap, this one. Because if you push into this room, you'll start a spawn where the slasher comes forward, and then if you try and kind of engage with him, you can get caught in the traps. So you want to be really careful with this, because you want to use the trap to kill the slasher if you can to save you ammo, but because of the timing here, it's very deliberate as well. Here he comes. Sometimes it makes it so that he gets to you before the trap does any of the work, and there's all these explosives that I want to use. So I hit him with that one, and now we have to navigate this room. And usually, guys, I wouldn't show these rooms where there's an environmental hazard, because you can take damage here, but if you do, you restart and you do it again, and there's generally not too much going on. But because this one had an enemy, I thought I'd keep it in, and here of course is the obligatory respirating necromorph, whose name eludes me right now, but I'm certain somebody in the comments knows it. And then this room has bodies, which, if you see bodies in Dead Space, it usually means a couple of things, especially when there's this many and they're intact. It means that you're probably going to be taking on infectors. So what I do here is, I put the bodies in the corner, so that I can separate the infectors and distract one of them and give him a little bit of a journey before he gets one, and it will enable me to kill them both. So, there's the first one. He takes an explosive to the dome, which I'm not happy about, and then the next one is making a necromorph right now. Can you hear him? So I do that to try and interrupt him, and he drops the body. And then I'm just going to try and mag dump him and finish him off. But he's desyncing, did you see that? The reason I think he desynced just then is because of the explosive I shot. I think it separated the body, so he was technically still in the animation of infecting, but he didn't have a host to infect. So he did the animation and then realized there was nobody there, and then he had to go back and... Oh, this is something I need to talk about as well. So I was experimenting, trying to save some ammunition here because I knew Leviathan was coming up. Even though I had a ton of ammo, I wanted to see what happened if you kept one alive by taking its leg. That pregnant is from the previous time I was in that room. I took his leg and I just moved on. And when I came back, he grew his leg back and he was always at the doorways and things when I was going back in the rooms. So do not let him live. There's no point. It just adds needless tension to something you don't actually have to deal with. But I thought for the purpose of the videos, it'd be a bit more interesting if I had some of these kind of transient things happening. And I do this in a few rooms where I test to see where the necromorphs will chase me, and there's a couple of moments where they follow you into some interesting places. And if you're willing to become uncomfortable and put yourself into some bad situations, it can lead to some really cool moments. But every so often they just block the doors and things, and that's kind of lame. But ammo's down a little bit here, but not too bad. And I'm going to do the obligatory stomps on the bodies so I can tilt more people in the comments. And then we're going to slap this guy and transition. So this room, I believe, is a brute room, but I don't know if we fight him right now. So, oh, we do. So you'll notice this is the exact same layout, pretty much, as the other hydroponic labs. It's just there's no foliage in here. And instead there is the largest creature you'll face in the game outside of the bosses. So same rules for the brute as before here. He's going to chase you very quickly. We're going to use the geometry to our advantage to duke and dive. And we're going to shoot him in the arm so we can get rid of one of his arms and then kill him with his own projectile. I haven't done the testing to see what limb is best to shoot off here before you do the telekinesis kill, because you can shoot a few of this guy's limbs, and I don't know if he has a particularly weaker limb. But I quite like fighting the brutes, and I do think even if there was a quick kill, I'd show you the quick kill so that you can see it if you don't know. But I still think I'd fight them traditionally because I really like the whole matador aspect of this design. But don't get too close to this dude because he moves so quickly. And at the end of the game there's a brute who is an enhanced brute, and he was at a further distance than this guy is, and he came for me and just punched me. And I'd completely forgotten that they could do that. So now that I've remembered that, I definitely respect this enemy a bit more. But did you see the node falling out of him then? That tells you that he's dead, and there's some of the crazy physics that are happening. And that's the end of the brute. And now we have the second tentacle cut, so watch the difference here, guys. Watch how many times I have to shoot this. And again, if you've never tried this on PC, the mouse feels terrible here. It's the worst feeling mouse you can possibly imagine. But what is that? That's about 8 rounds, 9 rounds maybe, and we get out of that situation. There is a bit of an exploit on those sequences that are going to give you an advantage if you're struggling. So when you're being dragged in between the moments where you can actually tangibly aim and shoot, if you mash reload, Isaac will usually do a cancelled reload and refill the plasma cutter. And on the final tentacle cut that's going to come up later on in the game, if you don't do that reload cancelling, you will almost certainly fail. That's harsh, basically. And I really wish those moments didn't exist because I just don't think that they're any good. I think the first time it happens, it's a really, really good idea. I think every time after that, they just crank up the scaling on it and it goes from being something that's fun and legitimately interesting to just something that's there to steal your ammunition. And if you do what I do with Leviathan coming up, you don't have the ammo to be stolen, basically. And it becomes a situation that is nigh untenable. But the cool thing about any situation is if you're stubborn enough, you can make it work. The problem is, are you willing to put in the time? Are you willing to put in the suffering? Because there is a lot of situations that seem like they're impossible, but they're more so a matter of time and a matter of persistence. And I can happily say that there was nothing like that really in this run. There was a couple of moments where I was being a bit stubborn, but there was nothing where I had to really sit there and just bleed. Nothing like the double grad fight in Metal Gear Rising, or some of the other things that have really taken a long time, like the final boss in Ys 9 took me a very long time because I just couldn't do it because it was 2 bosses in a row with no checkpoint and it was really tilting me. But those things happen sometimes. I'm currently recording some God of War and there's been a fight in that I've just not done no damage. And I've no damaged every other fight in the game up to that point, but it's not worth it to me to do it because I don't like the fight, And you'll hear me say this a lot if you watch my videos. I really like to challenge myself in challenge I enjoy. The challenge I don't enjoy, I just don't give a shit. But here is Leviathan. This is the boss that's going to essentially change everything that's happened so far in this run. And the strategy here is pretty simple. So usually, they want you to fly around in 0G here to dodge the tentacle, but you don't have to do that. When the tentacle screams and goes back inside, it starts an attack, and if you run all the way around, you see the screen shake just then? The screen shake tells you that the tentacle's landed and you can turn around and shoot. And that's all you have to do. You are completely safe, you will never get hit. Watch the tentacle. Screams, run, wait for the screen shake, right there, and the sound, and then shoot the weak point. If you do that correctly every time, the Leviathan will never hit you. And that's all we do for the first phase here, guys. And to give you an idea of how much scrimming I did in this match, I killed all the tentacles and then I shot all the explosives in the room in the mouth of the boss, and the boss didn't die. And then I tried using the explosives on the tentacles so I could get to the mouth a bit quicker. And then I gradually started to realize if I wasn't willing to use all my ammunition, I wasn't going to win. Because there's a moment when the mouth opens up and it starts firing projectiles at you, where you can fire the projectiles back at it, but because telekinesis is so unresponsive and so slow, it becomes really difficult to do it. And you feel like it's just not working. And if you're patient, you could spend 30 minutes just doing damage with his own projectiles and save yourself all the ammo. You can totally do that. I didn't want to do that, and additionally I didn't want to commentate that. So instead, I'm going to be very aggressive on this fight, and I'm going to shoot him a ton, and I'm going to try and detonate the charges in his mouth when he spits them out. And I don't know if any of this is even remotely successful, but that's what I'm going to try and do. And what I would recommend if you want to do a proper fun run here, because a couple of things to bear in mind on this phase, you can catch the projectiles, or you can shoot them and they stop. So my logic was, if I shoot them just as he fires them, they'll be in his mouth and they'll blow up. But it doesn't work that way, and I don't even know if these are doing any damage, but I try my best, and you'll get to see it in this video. If you want to have a really fun experience with this challenge run and you're not bothered about any kind of illusions of legitimacy or any of those super hardcore notions, then I would just put the trainer on here, guys. Give yourself infinite ammo and just fucking shoot this bitch. Because it's not a fun fight, right? It's not fun, it's not hard, it's not interesting, it's just shit. It's shit and it doesn't die. And to me, I don't see a point in a monster like this. And I don't like the boss fights in Dead Space because they're usually bad. But the final boss in this game, in spite of being a little bit boring and basic, it's not like this. You know, even with an unupgraded plasma cutter, you can hurt that boss and you can kill it in like 2 minutes, and it's decent, you know? Hell, the Hunter. I'm not a big fan of the Hunter, but he's a better boss fight than this. And then in the next game, the final boss against Nicole with the bloody... Is it called the pillar? The artifact? The marker, sorry. Like, the fight with Michelle and the marker, I mean... you either know or you don't know. You know, on my Dead Space 2 run that I did many years ago now, like, that fight wasn't fun. It was just miserable. And it's just... I don't understand making bosses in a game that's got such good combat and then making your bosses so brain dead for no reason. It really irritates me. So, if you want to imitate this run, and you don't want the rest of the levels to be an absolute nightmare of like spinning chests to get bullets instead of HP you don't need, then that's what I would recommend you do. But if you're the type of person that wants to do start to finish properly and you wanna do the run and nail the run, then perhaps taking your time on this fight to capitalize on ammunition is a good idea. Because we're now entering into the next phase where the tentacles come back, so we have to kill those guys. And it's the same concept here. Run away from the tentacle, wait for the screen shake, shoot the weak point, and then the mouth will come out again. And then finally on the ultimate phase of the fight, the mouth and the tentacles will work in conjunction, which is what's happening right now. And the interesting thing about this is the tentacles seem to block the hole if you try to do certain things on this phase. But I honestly didn't know whether or not this was going to be viable for this run. Because I was hoping that the explosives in the room would do a ton of damage to the boss. Because in my mind, if I were to make this fight, I would have made it so that if you fire these explosives inside the boss's mouth, you do that 3 or 4 times, it dies. You know? You can have it so that the tentacles take a beating. You know, you can have it so that the boss is really dangerous and he hurts you when he hits you. But if you fire an explosive that can kill a Guardian in 1 hit, if you fire a couple of those directly down into that core, it should just be the end of the pizza monster, and that should be all she wrote. But the funny part is I kind of knew this was going to happen too. Because on my very first Impossible run all those many years ago, back on 360, I got my ammo devoured by this creature, because this creature seems to be designed to steal your inventory. And then on the next sequences after this, I was really struggling because I just didn't have the bullets to deal with all the necromorphs. And the game does boast of having a dynamic system for ammunition, but the dynamic system doesn't really seem to be as good as I'd like it to be. And I don't know if I've spoke about this too much because I've been recording these in an interrupted fashion. But the amount of times when you have full HP and this game will give you healing items is fucking stupid. And I really don't understand why it works that way. And if you're doing a money run, that's really good because the healing items sell for a ton. But if you're trying to do a run where you need bullets and the game wants to give you everything but bullets, it doesn't make any sense to me. And I wish there was some kind of percentage-based drop system that was dynamic, and depending on how much money you had and depending on how much HP you had, it would dictate that the game would drop you the resource you need the most. And I was thinking when I was playing, maybe the game doesn't want to give me ammo that much because I've got a lot of ammo and they're reading all that ammo in my inventory. But after this fight, when I don't have any ammo in my inventory, the game still wants to give me money even though I have 200,000 credits. The game still wants to give me medpacks even though I'm not damaged. You know, it's that weird thing, like I am literally untouched. And it doesn't make a ton of sense. But this is clearly not the most expedient way to, or efficient way to do this boss. But it's the way I ended up doing it. And as much as I was salty about what happened next, it does make the run more exciting. And for me, there aren't many ways to distinguish yourself on YouTube when it comes to a walkthrough or any kind of challenge run, because there's always going to be the person that did the playthrough that's really popular. There's always going to be the person that did the walkthrough that's really popular. There's always going to be the no damage run that's on there that's really popular. And then there's always going to be like the speedrun that's really popular. So how do you make your video justified? What do you do that makes it more interesting? And for me, it's the things that make up the constituents of my own personal style, which is commentary that might be different to the commentary that you're used to. And of course, all these ridiculous stipulations. And just the madness that ensues. But we've only got another 3 minutes of shooting this dogshit boss. And then we're going to win, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this wonderful encounter right now. But it's interesting, isn't it, when it comes to boss fights? Because you can have a boss fight that's really hard. You can have a boss fight that's really tanky. You can have a boss fight that is really clever but goes down in like 3 repetitive actions. You know, what would you have done to make the Leviathan more of a threat or more of an interesting encounter? Because you know what I think they should have done in this? I think that there should have been some kind of mechanisms in this room. And when the tentacle slam comes down, I think the mechanism should have trapped the arms. I think that would have been a much better system here. And all you needed to do would be bait 3 of the slams into certain areas of the room and then trap the arms completely. And then you just fight the face, and maybe the face has got a couple of moves. And it's just a conventional boss, and it's just not this. Because in this room's defense, I love the idea of the room. I love this cylinder, this circular chamber, and you can just rotate the whole way. I think that's really, really interesting. And I don't mind the idea of firing projectiles back at a boss that it's firing at you. It's very Ganondorf. It's just, if this fight was in Dead Space 2, it would be perfect. Because you would literally dodge all of the mouth blasts until the final one, and then you'd grab the final one and you'd throw it back. And then you'd just do that and you wouldn't even have to shoot a bullet. But then again, that TK in Dead Space 2 is so good, you might be able to grab all of them and fire them back, and the boss would just never stand a chance. And I suppose there's a line to be drawn here, isn't there? Do you want your boss in your survival horror to be completely neutralizable by a good player? Or do you want it so that regardless of how good you are, it's still a struggle? Because say what you want about the quality of this fight, I cannot do this quickly. You know? There's nothing I can do here to get through this boss like it doesn't exist. And look at my ammo, guys. I had 18 shots left. That's it. All gone. Everything gone. And that's what we're going to be dealing with, because all the Necros now, they're going to be in larger groups, they're going to be black, it's going to be all kinds of madness. So welcome to the really hard part of the run. Thank you for watching, and you take care now.